This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, whoa, the government's shut down. And Republicans are running around going, it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Schumer shutdown. But Donald Trump has a way of kind of blowing up his own party's most effective BS messaging. You know? I mean, the simple reality is that Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. When all three parties control, or when one party controls all three branches of government, there has never, ever been a government shutdown. At least to the best of my knowledge. Certainly not in the last few decades. And, I mean, maybe it happened once back in 1704 or something, but I doubt it. Or 1804. But what's interesting is that Donald Trump, now here, just understand this. This is mind-boggling. And what's most mind-boggling to me about it is that the media has not been all over this all morning. And I don't know, maybe some parts of it have, but here's the deal. The Republicans control the House, the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court. But the Republicans would tell you they only have 50 votes in the Senate, well, 51 with Mike Pence. So they can only pass things via a majority. So if somebody decides to filibuster something, they need 60 votes. Okay, so far so good. And they're saying, hey, you know, the Democrats are filibustering this thing. They're going to need 60 votes. And, you know, therefore the Democrats are shutting down. Or so Republicans are going to need 60 votes to pass, you know, a continuing resolution to fund the government. And therefore, it's all the fault of the Democrats. And everybody in the country is going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. You know, all those years when Mitch McConnell was demanding 60 votes, Barack Obama couldn't get anything done because, you know, it took 60 votes and the Republicans filibustered everything. Even that brilliant legislation Nancy Pelosi got out of the House that would have reversed the incentives for corporations that sent their jobs overseas. It would have done away with the tax breaks that companies currently get. And in fact, the new tax law actually expanded those tax breaks. Companies even have more incentive today to ship jobs overseas than they had last year. But 5 years ago, Nancy Pelosi actually got a bill out of the House that did away with all those incentives. Said no more tax breaks at all if you move your jobs overseas. And by the way, if you bring those jobs back, we realize there's some costs involved. We'll give you a tax break for bringing them back. It had more than 50 votes in the Senate. It would have passed, but the Republicans filibustered it. And so, you know, the Democrats kind of went along with that. And, well, actually, there were a lot of Democrats saying, hey, wait a minute, Mitch McConnell, this isn't right. So anyhow, here's the deal. The president tweeted out this morning, and this is what's so hysterical about this whole thing. He said, actually he tweeted it out yesterday. He said, great to see how hard Republicans are fighting for our military and safety at the border. The Dems just want illegal immigrants to pour into our nation unchecked. If stalemate continues, Republicans should go to 51% nuclear option and vote on real long-term budget, no continuing resolutions. Now, here's what the president just said. Trump just said, Republicans can pass this stuff. There's no problem with Democrats filibustering things. Mitch McConnell could hold a single vote that only takes 50 votes to win that says, for the course of one day, we're gonna invoke the nuclear option and do away with the filibuster for anything that has to do with, say, keeping the government open. I mean, they can make it very specific. We're going to do away with the filibuster for a day. This has happened, by the way, twice in the last couple of years. President Obama did away with the filibuster on non-Supreme Court judicial appointments so that, you know, he could finally overcome 6 years of Mitch McConnell's Republican obstruction, or at least try to start to overcome it. The Republicans continue the obstruction. And there's been another one. I believe it had to do with the Supreme Court appointment. I'd have to go back and look, but there have been 2 times now in the last couple of years when the Congress has said, we're going to dial back on the ability of a minority party, in this case would be the Democrats, to filibuster legislation. Which is a simple way of saying the Republicans could pass anything they wanted without a single vote from the Democrats. All they'd have to do is invoke the nuclear option like, Harry Reid did and Mitch McConnell has already done. They've just done it around things that have to do with judicial appointments. They could just as easily do it around something that has to do with the budget. In other words, there is no Schumer shutdown. It's arguably impossible. Mitch McConnell has the votes to pull the nuclear option. Mitch McConnell can do it. And Donald Trump has now pointed that out. He's pointed out, Donald Trump has come right out and said in his tweet, all this Sturm und Drang, all these Fox News commentators and right-wingers on radio and TV. It was so funny. I caught a little bit of Stephanie Ruhle this morning on MSNBC, and she was interviewing some Republican, and he's like, well, as long as the Democrats insist on shutting everything down, and she wasn't quite pushing back on it. I was like, oh, give me a break. That's when I flipped the channel to CNN. I was like, give me a break. Come on. You could simply pull the nuclear option. I mean, it's not that, and pass it. You don't need Democrats' votes. You don't need Democrats' votes for the nuclear option. You don't need Democrats' votes for the vote once you've done away with the filibuster, even if just for one day. And by the way, this is the argument that Republicans were making against Democrats for 8 years. Democrats would say, oh, that damn Mitch McConnell, he won't let us pass legislation that would bring our jobs home from China, which was true. And so the Republicans said, well, you've got 50 votes. You got more than 50 votes in the Senate. Why don't you just pull the nuclear option? Come on, you guys, it's your responsibility. Don't whine at us. And it was thing after thing after thing. I mean, this was around reapportionment, around redistricting, gerrymandering. There was a debate around that. There was a debate around taxes. There was a debate around government negotiating drug prices for Medicare Part D. There was probably 40 or 50 different topics during particularly during the first couple of years when President Obama was president, when he had enough votes in the Senate to get a majority on something, but not enough to overcome a filibuster. He could only overcome a filibuster for 74 legislative days out of his entire 8 years. And during the first 2 years, there was, Democratic control of the Senate, but not 60 votes. And every time the Democrats were not capable of overcoming that 60-vote threshold and knocking down what Republicans were saying, the Republicans just said, oh, come on, guys, you still control the Senate. You can pull the nuclear option. You can, this isn't our fault. We're not going to let you blame us. And now the media and even Democrats are going, oh, it's our fault. Come on. Start pointing out to the Republicans, if you don't like it, pull the nuclear option. If you're that passionate, if you really care that much, if you think what we're doing is wrong, pull the nuclear option, guys. Come on, do what your president is telling you to do. But Mitch McConnell is like, oh, no, we're going to pretend he never even said that because we'd rather play victim. Right. And meanwhile, the government is shut down, and Trump somehow thinks that's going to be a good thing. What we need is a good, clean shutdown. Yeah, right. Incredible. Anyhow, that's just the beginning. The stuff I've got for today's program is incredible. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More, by the way, I was just sharing that from Trump calls for nuclear option and shutdown. McConnell signals no over on Fox News' website. And welcome back. What an interesting weekend, huh? All this coverage and no real, I didn't see any, much of any real serious conversation about, what this all means. Kevin in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, Kevin, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks, Tom. I got to say that this actually is the most frightening event for me as far as the president goes. And what I mean by that is that leaders are really tested at times of crisis, not in the regular milieu of the work. And the problem that I have right now, and what frightens me, is that this president is actually missing in action. I remember this shutdown in the 90s and also in 2013. And both President Clinton and President Obama, they sat down with Democrats and they sat down with Republicans, and they really tried to hash it out. Instead, what this president has done is he's missing in action. And the reason why it frightens me is that if this happens in a crisis, and this is a crisis right now in our country, as far as the shutdown goes, what would happen if there was a nuclear strike? And if this president is listening to people like Stephen Miller to get his advice, or General Kelly to get his advice, and doesn't have the sense of mind to make up his own decision on what to do, then where are we going to be when a real frightening crisis like a nuclear, like what might happen with Kim Jong-un or anything else that is a possible, crisis that happens in the world? And I think this is the real test of this president, and that's what really disturbs me.
Yeah. It's what you're pointing out, Kevin, is that sometimes the real crisis is the one that's kind of meta to the current crisis and therefore much bigger. For example, the fact that Trump is willing to pay a bribe to Stormy Daniels, $130,000 in hush money, bribe is the wrong word, I guess, hush money, suggests that he's vulnerable to blackmail from his affairs. If he's vulnerable to blackmail from his affairs, is the government of Saudi Arabia blackmailing him? Is the government of Israel blackmailing him? Is the government of Russia blackmailing him? Is one of his old business partners blackmailing him? Are they blackmailing him with the government? Are they blackmailing him with his wife? All that kind of thing. And the same thing with this. I mean, it's like, he's missing in action. I thought an interesting thing this morning, I caught the last hour of Morning Joe, which is the first hour recycled, with a few pieces stitched in here and there. And it was real interesting that Joe Scarborough was clearly speaking directly to the president. And it was so obvious. And he kept saying over and over and over again, is this president really so weak that he relies on a 23-year-old Stephen Miller telling him what to do? That, he can work out a deal with serious statesmen who have been negotiating things for their lifetimes, like Dick Durbin and Mitch McConnell, and he can work these things out and he can make it happen. And then Stephen Miller, a 23-year-old kid, comes in and blows it up. And I thought it was, brilliant. I don't know if Trump will see it, but if he does, it may be the end of Stephen Miller. But we'll see. We'll see where this goes, Kevin. But I share your concern that it's not just that he's missing in action. It's that whoever he talked to last is the one who defines his worldview. And unfortunately, John Kelly and Steve Miller do not seem to be anything other than toxic in this situation. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Fascinating this morning to watch Joe Scarborough on TV talking directly to the president, obviously, saying, well, I can't believe the president of the United States is so weak, a word that makes Donald Trump's head explode, is so weak that he's letting a 24-year-old or 23-year-old, I've heard different ages ascribed to Steve Miller. I got to look him up on Wikipedia at some point here today, I suppose. Lead him around by the nose. He's got this 20-something kid leading him around by the nose and telling him what to do. And then, of course, John Kelly, too. Apparently what's going on is Trump sits down with, Schumer and Pelosi and a whole bunch of Republicans, Lindsey Graham and, Susan Collins and the so-called moderate Republicans. And he works out a deal. And then they leave. And Stephen Miller and John Kelly come into the room and they say, you can't do that, Mr. President. You can't do that. Sorry. And Trump goes, oh, you mean I'll blow up my base? People will be unhappy with me? See, they know the magic words. People will not like you, President Trump, if you say that. And he goes, oh, well, I can't say that. I can't do that. Oh, my God. People won't like me? It's going to upset my base? We can't have that. So we've got, kind of two problems. One, that the Republican Party, which doesn't believe in government, has a hard time governing when it controls government. We've seen that over and over again. I mean, this really began with the Reagan administration, the systematic dismantling and destruction of good government policies. We used to have a vital American government, a vital democracy. John Kennedy said, I want to send a man to the moon and bring him home safely within a decade. They did it in 8 years. Kennedy wasn't around to see it, tragically, but they did it in 8 years. Now we can't even fix our bridges. We can't put positive train control on Amtrak trains so people don't die. It's too expensive. We can't afford it. We've got to devote that money to tax cuts for billionaires and Apple. Come on. We've got our priorities, say the Republicans. So, this is a serious problem. But there's a bunch of other serious problems, too, that accompany this. For example, this is from Talking Points memo by Allegra Kirkland. Did Citizens United help Russians funnel money to the NRA? And I would add, my concern here, of course, I'm concerned about Russia interfering in our elections. I'm also concerned about other countries interfering with our elections as well, particularly at the top of that list, Saudi Arabia and Israel, but many others as well. But anyhow, it says, if the gun lobby did take Russian money, it likely couldn't have done it without a determined campaign by Republicans and a major assist from the Supreme Court to weaken laws governing money in politics. Obama, during his first State of the Union address, said, that Citizens United will, quote, open a floodgate for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limits in our elections. Sam Alito, the Supreme Court Justice, one of the most right-wing, he's now not as right-wing as Neil Gorsuch, of course, who's like, Attila the Hun, but he's pretty damn right-wing. Sam Alito mouthed, not true. Well, it turns out not only was, and even PolitiFact said it was mostly false. Turns out Obama was 100% right. And, now you've got nonprofits setting up 501c4s. The NRA has done this. These are nonprofit agencies that can accept donations. And then those donations are, particular types of donations are invisible. It's dark money. And then the NRA takes that money. In this case, the allegation is they took it from a Russian bankster and used it to $50 million to support the Trump campaign. This kind of money laundering operation. Well, this is exactly what happened with the NRA. We'll see what's going to happen with the government shutdown, by the way. Chuck Schumer is giving a speech right now. This is Justice John Paul Stevens, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, and Sonia Sotomayor. They wrote the principal rebuttal, the objection to Citizens United. And they wrote, and this is from the actual decision. This is the Citizens United, the dissent in the Citizens United decision. If taken seriously, our colleague's assumption that the identity of a speaker has no relevance to the government's ability to regulate political speech would lead to some remarkable conclusions. This was, again, 2010, Citizens United. Such an assumption would have accorded the propaganda broadcast to our troops by Tokyo Rose during World War II the same protection as speech by Allied commanders. More pertinently, it would appear to afford the same protection to multinational corporations controlled by foreigners as to individual Americans. And speaking directly to that issue on the day of the decision, British Broadcasting Corporation investigative journalist Greg Pallas wrote an article whose headline is self-explanatory. Supreme Court to okay Al-Qaeda donations to Sarah Palin. Right. I mean, this is where we're at. This is how far we've come. This is how we got here. Meanwhile, China's up to some very, very interesting behaviors. A Hong Kong-based book publisher with Swedish citizenship was secretly spirited to China and held in custody for 2 years. Why? He published books critical of the Chinese government. So China has criminalized essentially the internet. If they find that you have read certain things on the internet, Not only do they take it's sort of the equivalent of child porn in the United States. Not only do they take your computer, but they throw you in prison for years. And all they have to do to make sure it's on your computer is email it to you. So China can now take down anybody. Is that what Jeff Sessions is trying to do with pot here in the United States?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I want to address that issue in a little more detail right after the break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Comcast. Good, I can check and see why we can now. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Whew. Boy, what a day. The news is, it's interesting. BBC just sent out a news alert saying, impasse averted, or words to that effect. Chuck Schumer just spoke in the Senate, and Dick Durbin just spoke in the Senate. And basically, everybody's congratulating everybody. And Dick Durbin looked right at the camera and said, to the dreamers out there, in 3 weeks, we are going to vote on it, and we're going to make it happen. Don't worry. It looks to me, we don't have the details yet of exactly what it is that everybody's, kumbayaing on around this stuff. And of course, there hasn't been a vote yet, but there will be probably soon. But the thing that concerns me is that the Democrats are taking Mitch McConnell's word, apparently, that he's willing to hold a vote later on with a, quote, level playing field, whatever the hell that means. And this is the same Mitch McConnell whose constitutional duty was to give President Barack Obama a vote on his Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, and who refused to do that day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month after month. Every single day, Mitch McConnell lied about his, spit in the face of his oath of office, refused to do what the Constitution requires, put his party above his country. And now we're supposed to think that this man, this demonstrated liar, this demonstrated partisan hack, this shill, this toady for the petro-billionaire class, is going to somehow do something at some point in the future that's worth giving him what he wants right now? I find very little enthusiasm for that perspective. I don't see it. Anyhow, Jim in San Diego. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Good. I agree with everything you said about the nuclear option, but I was listening to Schumer at the same time I was on hold here, and he was saying that we needed to have 60 votes. And
right.
He said it not once but 3 times.
No, I get that, but what he's saying is that he will, they've got a bunch of Democrats who are already willing to go along, the Manchin and Heitkamp and Tester and whatnot. And if they can sweeten this a little more, he can get a couple more, and he'll help him get the 60 votes. They need 14 Democrats, basically.
That's correct. My point is that I agree with 100% with you, in that we should, as a Democrat, come out. You've got the ability to do this. The shutdown is all upon your shoulders, and that should be the message.
I agree.
Because the message right now is that we're holding hostage military people for the
dreamers.
Immigrants or the dreamers.
Yeah.
And that's a losing proposition for us. So I think we have to turn it around strongly, and I really appreciate what you said, and I hope you can keep pounding that, because I think it's vital to winning the public relation argument.
Yeah, I agree. And well, thank you, Jim. And in fact, the Republicans are in the background playing super hardball. I mean, Donald Trump has millions of people on his email list. I'm one of them. I sent $5 to his campaign, as I did most of the other campaigns early on, just to get on their mailing list and have them treat me as a donor so that I would know what was going on. And I got an email yesterday or the day before, I think it was yesterday morning, from Donald Trump, signed by Donald Trump. Tom Perez is on? Oh, great. That had this just absolutely vicious ad in it. We'll get to more of that in just a moment. Tom Perez is on the line with us. He is the chair of the Democratic National Party, the DNC chairman, former U.S. Secretary of Labor, Democrats.org, of course, the website. You can tweet him at Tom Perez, Perez. Secretary, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you, too. So what is this? What is the state of play here? And the rant that I was just doing is back when during those first 2 years when the Democrats controlled the Senate in the first 2 years of President Obama's administration, every time really good legislation came out of the House, passed the House, went to the Senate, and there were more than 50 votes for it in the Senate, but not 60. The Republicans blamed the Democrats for it not passing because they said, well, why don't you guys just do the nuclear option? You know, it's up to you. You can have 50 votes. And McConnell could do that right now. And so what do you think about the Democratic strategy simply saying, hey, you guys, it's on you. If you don't, you know, just do your nuclear option?
Well, it is. I mean, one thing it's important to underscore is this shutdown that just occurred, this Republican shutdown, was unprecedented in our nation's history. Never have we had a situation where one party controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the government shut down until Friday at midnight of last week. And that is remarkable. And the thing about it to me, Tom, is last May, President Trump tweeted shutdown would be a good thing. And, you know, you've heard him say previously when President Obama was in control, you know, when there's a shutdown, that's the president's fault. Well, where was he this weekend? He you know, they needed to call out the guard to find him because he was nowhere to be found. And that's not leadership. And you know, you're spot on in what you're saying, which is the Republicans, they're holding the cards here. And the reason this shutdown occurred is because they failed to do their basic job. And you know, their own military, their own Secretary of Defense was saying, you can't govern 1 week at a time. And that is spot on. And this was so avoidable. And I'm obviously following events as you do, with the Senate taking this vote right now. But I'm confident that we're going to continue to keep fighting for Dreamers. We're going to continue to make sure that any final budget agreement is going to include the necessary things we need to do to protect Dreamers, to protect veterans, to help with the disaster relief from Puerto Rico, Texas, and elsewhere, to help with the pension issues that we need to deal with. This is just chronic incompetence on the Republican side, and this is why I'm proud to be a Democrat, because we had to stand up. They are spot on.
They are, however,
negotiating with Jell-O. That's what it is.
Yeah, and that's a good, trying to nail Jell-O to the wall is a great old metaphor. But they are absolutely playing hardball with this. I received in email, as somebody who, you might have heard me say before I put you on the air early on, I do this every 4 years, is give $5 to basically all of the serious candidates just to get on their list so I can see everything that they're doing. And so at least 4 days a week, I get an email from Donald Trump and his campaign. And I got one yesterday, I believe it was, containing this ad, which is apparently running on television, in which they are blaming, they're basically saying Democrats are willing to shut down government over, quote, illegal immigrants. In other words, they're talking about Dreamers, who technically are here without documentation and therefore here illegally, except they're not here illegally under President Obama's executive order. They won't be illegal until March 5th. But in any case, here's the ad. Listen to this. No?
1 second.
I'm sorry, we didn't have it ready. But anyhow, you know what I'm talking about here, Tom. And he says, it tells the story of an American citizen who was killed by an undocumented person, and says now all this is going to be on the Democrats' head. How do you respond to that? I mean, they're doing some deceptive but masterful framing here.
Well, let's look at the facts, and I know the facts are irrelevant to the Republicans. Dreamers are serving in our armed forces right now. Dreamers are our first responders. Dreamers are our school teachers. Dreamers are our healthcare professionals right now. Dreamers are every bit as American as my U.S.-born 3 children. They just don't have the piece of paper. And that's why overwhelmingly Republicans, Democrats, Independents, something like 80% of the American people understand that it's an economic imperative and it's a moral imperative to grant citizenship and a pathway to citizenship to dreamers. That's what this is about. And this is not the first time that this president has demagogued this issue, and it won't be the last time that they've done this. And this government shutdown is about dreamers, but it's about much more than that. It's about putting our values in action. It's about putting our values in action to help community health clinics. It's about pension issues. It's about disaster relief. It's about so many issues that are critical to communities across this country. And you know, this isn't, the government shutdown isn't the only thing that the government isn't the only thing that Donald Trump's trying to shut down. He's really trying to shut down so many fundamental, basic American values: the value of equal opportunity, the value of inclusion, this assault on basic American values, this assault that is unrelenting. That is why I think it is so important for Democrats to stand up right now. And you know, this was so preventable. I get back to my first point, Tom. This has never happened in American history.
Yeah.
One party controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they try to blame it on someone else. And you know why they shut the government down? Because, frankly, a lot of them just don't believe in government.
Yeah.
And so they're perfectly happy when it's shut down. I believe, as a Democrat, the government can actually do good things for people.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. Tom, hang on just a second.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Tom Perez, head of the DNC. Sir, I'd love to get you back to talk about what's the difference between a precinct committee person and a chair and all these other kinds of things people can do in the DNC. I hope you can come back.
I would be honored to do that, Tom. It's always great to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome back. Whew. What a day. Judd in Newark, New Jersey. Hey, Judd, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I'd like to thank you for your contribution to our informed state of history.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. In regard to that, there is, I come from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and so on and so forth, but the early writers of our various television programming created a program called The Honeymooners. There was a guy named Ralph Cramden.
Yeah, Jackie Gleason.
That's right. And this character reminds me so much of this Trump character that we have as president.
Yeah, Ralph Cramden was the 50s version of Archie Bunker, the 80s version of Donald Trump today.
Oh, my goodness. It's amazing. There's another program called Columbo. And
with Peter Falk.
The writers of that program seem to lay out a sort of a caricature of the influences of wealthy people, super wealthy people, and the lengths that they go to ensure their wealth.
That's right. There was about half the time Columbo was bringing down haughty rich guys, wasn't he, who had committed murder. Yeah.
That's right. Rather humorous.
And they always underestimated him because he was wearing a ratty old raincoat and his car, wasn't washed.
Yes, in a sense, he represented our dwindling middle class.
Yeah.
The lowering of the rank of the middle class here in the United States.
Yeah.
In any case, thanks again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just want to offer that.
Sure. Thanks, Judd. Thanks for the call, and thank you for your kind words. Linda in California City, California. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi, Tom. The dreamers are vitally important, saving them permanently, of course.
Agreed.
But that said, Tom, this is much bigger than the dreamers. Yep. Everybody I know, and me included, feels like this shutdown is symbolic of the Democratic Party either being willing and able to stand up to what they're doing, destroying our government, stand up to them, at least take a small step to stop it, or not.
Yeah.
And from what was just, I agree with everything Tom Perez just said, but I think if they give in, if they say, well, okay, we're going to believe Mitch McConnell, who's been lying to us serially forever, and we're just going to sit back down and say, okay, we'll be good boys and girls, the whole country is not going to trust the Democratic Party to stand up to these monsters who are now trying to destroy us.
Yeah, agreed.
This is huge. And they may have just sacrificed the November election if they cave in on this. I'm just frightened half to death about it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, there are pundits on both sides. There was an article in the Washington Post yesterday about how the shutdown's going to help Democrats more than Republicans, or maybe it was the New York Times. And I think it was, more the headline than anything else. It was almost like they're targeting this at the vulnerable Democrats. I disagree. I believe that if you stand on principle, and I think the fact that, Bernie took 21% of West Virginia and beat, won in Michigan hugely, proves it. If you stand on principle, even when people disagree with your policies, they will respect you and they will stand with you. Linda, thank you so much for the call. Well said. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Jane in Gadsden, Alabama. Hey, Jane, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm just a little blue dot in a red sea down here in Gadsden. If you'll recall, this is Roy Moore's hometown.
Oh, my.
Yes, oh, my. So, anyway, but that's not why I called today. This is my first call to you, but I watch you faithfully. Love your show.
Thank you.
Love what you stand for. But the first thing I heard this morning also was Joe Scarborough on his show. And, yeah, it might be a great way to get rid of this Miller character, but it scared me. And I'm not usually too alarmed about the nuclear thing, but I could just imagine Donald Trump hearing weak, over and over again and having to prove something with that little button he's so proud of. So what do you think about that, Tom?
I think Donald Trump is essentially, at his core, a transactional person. I think that he lives his life not by core principles around which you organize behavior and thought, but rather around the need to be loved and to be approved of and to prove that he's the very, very best. And so he organizes his behavior and thoughts around those things. And those things are fairly compartmentalized. So I think that Joe Scarborough basically tweaking him about weak with regard to Stephen Miller, with regard to, in the immigration debate in the United States, will probably remain in that bucket in Donald Trump's mind. I don't think that he's going to think, Scarborough is calling me weak, with regard to Kim Jong-un. From what little I've been able to see,
Yeah, well, I trust your judgment on things like this, and you've made me feel a lot better.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Great work, Tom.
Thanks.
Thank
You too. Have a great day. Stuart in Hillsboro, Oregon. Hey, Stuart, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I don't know if you're aware, and I don't know if the viewers are aware, if you call the White House hotline right now, there's a recording saying that it's a female voice, and she states that we are unable to take your call because of a government shutdown, and which is caused by the Democrats who believe that illegal aliens are more important than our military and the...
Yeah, here's an actual clip of it right here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for calling the White House comment line. Thank you for calling the White House. Unfortunately, we cannot answer your call today because congressional Democrats are holding government funding, including funding for our troops and other national security priorities, hostage to an unrelated immigration debate. Due to this obstruction, the government is shut down. In the meantime, you can leave a comment for the president,
et cetera, et cetera. It sends you over to a suck up to the president website. But there's a real problem with this, Stuart, and that is that making a partisan statement like that on a government on government property using the government telephone answering system is a violation of, I believe, the Logan Act, or no, it is a violation of federal law. There is a law that says you can't. This is the reason why when members of the House and Senate want to beg rich people for money, they have to leave their office building and go to a rented office. There are rented offices all over Washington, D.C. near the Capitol building, specifically for these people to go sit in a private place and make their phone calls begging for money. When you do partisan stuff, you can't do it using government systems, and that's what this is. So here's the Trump administration nakedly breaking the law and thumbing their nose at us about it.
And there's no pushback on it. If a Democrat was to do it, I think this would be a major.
If Obama did this, they would be holding impeachment hearings right now.
And why is this acceptable to the American people?
Yeah, it's not, and it shouldn't be. And I think that what has happened is that the right wing has a very large and very well funded, and I'm talking a billionaire owning Fox so-called News. Several multimillionaire corporations owning the vast majority of radio stations in the United States that will only program right-wing media because it supports their desire for tax cuts and things like that. The right-wing, and then you've got all these right-wing think tanks and writers who write op-eds for newspapers and websites all over the world or all over the country literally every day. There's this enormous right-wing ecosystem that allows them to do things like spread insane outrage if President Obama were to record a message like that. There is no parallel on the Democratic side. There simply isn't. And people say, well, what about MSNBC? Well, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough was a Republican, Nicole Wallace, a Republican. MSNBC is more likely to have Republicans on than Democrats, frankly. And when they do have Democrats, it's very rare that you get actual progressive Democrats, whereas they will have actual right-wing Republicans constantly. And so, it's just so much easier for the right to play those kind of games than it is for the rest of us. And in my opinion, that's all the more the tragedy. But I get absolutely what you're saying, Stuart. Thanks a lot for the call. Tim in Messick, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hey, you are my brother.
What's up?
You are absolutely right about, because I was listening on the phone, but it doesn't really come through as well. And it's the corporate media, but what I'm really calling about is the class warfare. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to need your information because you're much more educated than I am. But as far as I'm concerned, well, we need Bernie Sanders. He's got to run as an independent socialist. And I'm a union machinist. I grew up in Southwest Detroit. And I'm sorry to say, I'm ashamed to say that I've actually installed equipment that I knew eliminated jobs. And I hated myself for doing that, and I still do. But I had to do what I had to do. And anyway, there was a general, I think his name was Doolittle. He commanded the Army Air Corps during World War II. Okay? And when he talked to his, pilots, he says, we're going to bomb Japan, and the way we can win this war is destroy their manufacturing. We take away their jobs. We'll demoralize them.
Right.
Tim,
you hear that music?
Tactic, and that's what's happening to us. That's what's been happening to us.
Yeah.
And the Democrats and the Republicans are like good cop, bad cop.
Yep. Tim, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, columnist with the Daily Beast, author of The Making of Donald Trump, and he has a brand new book out. It's even worse than you think, what the Trump administration is doing to America. He also teaches at Syracuse University College of Law and was a consultant for House of Cards on Netflix. His website, davidkjohnston.com. And you can tweet him at DavidKJ. David, welcome back to the program. It's been a while.
Well, thank you, Tom. It has been a while. I no longer write for the Daily Beast or teach at Syracuse, but I do run the website DC Report, singular, dcreport.org, where we cover what Trump and Congress do as opposed to what most journalists cover, which is what they say. We cover what they do.
Great. We will update your bio. Your book is fascinating. I've read about the first 80 or 90 pages of it. We just got our copy, and I've just been digging through it. How would you summarize the goal of this book? It's worse than you think. It's even worse than you think. And what provoked you to pursue that goal?
Well, when Donald announced in 2015, and he'd been talking about being president since 1985, he was dismissed by politics reporters because 3 years earlier in 2012, he had told them he was running, and he was really running for a new contract with NBC. I then wrote a book that came out in the summer of 2016 that's a biography about his long criminal involvement and associations and all these horrible things he's done, all from the public record, and a few conversations he and I have had over the last 30 years. This book, when he won the Electoral College, arose because I realized journalists who had completely botched covering the campaign and had not done what we call in news scrubbing the candidate were unlikely to do well covering him. Well, they've done very well covering what he says and tweets and the palace intrigues, but nobody's covering what he's doing to our government. He is putting your life at risk. He is putting our economy at risk. He is inadvertently turning into the best friend the government in Beijing has ever had as it expands its political and military and economic influence. He has turned polluters free to pollute. They've stopped dealing seriously with deaths on the job, worker job safety issues, because the Trump team has loosed what I call political termites into the government, and they are eating away at the structure of our government. And, you don't usually know when there are termites in the walls and in the floor until you put your foot through the floor in the kitchen and discover you've got a massive bill to fix it.
Yeah, it seems. Let's just go through the details on some of these. You start out the book, your chapters, kleptocracy rising and emoluments and refusals to pay, and each is kind of couched around Trump's former business practices, but now also his activities as president?
That's right. If you watched the motorcade when Trump left the Capitol to go to the White House, you saw that the car called the Beast stopped at a certain point, and the family got out and took a 2-minute spin on the sidewalk or on the street. What not one television network told you, and the camera never showed you, was they stopped right in front of the Trump Washington Hotel, the old post office. But to people seeking to curry favor with the administration, foreign governments, businesses, lobbyists, they all got the message. You want to get things from the Trump administration, you will do business with Trump businesses and put money in his pocket. Right. That was just the beginning. The emoluments clause. Emolument is a hoary old word that means gain, economic gain. And the framers of our Constitution, Tom, were perfectly aware that there were European kings who were disloyal to their own countries and on the payroll of other countries. So they put the word emoluments in the Constitution 3 times. The president is not supposed to receive income from foreign governments, and also he is barred specifically from any income from the United States government or state governments, the 50 state governments, other than his salary and perks. Well, Trump spent a third of his time at Mar-a-Lago, his Bedminster golf course, and Trump Tower, where the taxpayers are spending a fortune renting golf carts for Secret Service agents, ordering meals, staying in hotel rooms, and then they're all spending by local and state police. Absolute violation of the Constitution, about which the Republican leadership in Congress goes, bleh.
Yeah. Let's talk about the workers. Trump portrayed himself as the great champion of workers on the campaign trail and used a lot of rhetoric that in some ways was indistinguishable from things that Bernie was saying, that Hillary Clinton was saying, for that matter. Democratic Party positions even, broadly speaking.
Donald's economic platform that the Washington crowd is taking care of the rich and they're emptying your pocket comes right out of my trilogy that I was on your show about when they came out, Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, and The Fine Print.
Right.
And I know that Donald watched me on television talking about this. He doesn't read books, but I know he saw me on television, and he distilled from those books this basic message that he was the champion of the forgotten man here. As soon as he got into office, he forgot the forgotten man. For example, they have not posted a worker death at the Labor Department website since last August.
Well, they took down the website.
American workers. Say it again?
They took down the website.
They took down for a while. The last time I checked, they had put it back up, but they hadn't posted anything. They also stopped posting press releases, which are a way to shame companies that, any company can have somebody die on the job from a whole series of bad events, but there are employers who are particularly notorious. And they used to shame these companies by publicly writing about them. They stopped doing that. Then we wrote about that at DC Report with the help from Jordan Barab, who used to run or be deputy of the OSHA operation. They put them back up for a while. I haven't looked to see if they're continuing to do it, but I would be shocked if I go look.
And how is he screwing veterans?
Oh, in many, many ways. If you're a 100% disabled veteran, as my father was of World War II, you get disability pay. The Trump administration proposes that when you reach normal retirement age, you be reduced by the Social Security benefits you should be getting, except you don't have any because you haven't been working. So someone who's getting $35,000 a year would suddenly get $13,000 a year and be plunged into poverty. They are so damaging to veterans, in fact, that they want to round down checks. Now, it's not a lot of money. It's, I think, $12 million a year, but that's how little regard they have for veterans. This is all a con. Trump is a grifter. He doesn't care about veterans. He's a draft dodger, as was his grandfather, who came to America after dodging the German draft and who lied to get his citizenship.
David, in the roughly 2 minutes, or actually about a minute we have left, excuse me, what can we do about this? What's your advice to Democrats and progressives?
We have to get a new Congress.
Yeah.
The Republican leadership has made it clear that they will just look the other way. And all that matters is who turns out to vote. Yeah. That's all that matters. So register to vote, get other people to register to vote, and take vacation time and arrange on Election Day to drive people to the polls. And if you're in an area that's guaranteed to go, one party or the other can't be switched, then find out where you can go to take people to the polls, because that's all that matters. We need a new Congress that represents the forgotten man, not the man who forgot the forgotten man.
And if I could add, if you live in a state that is controlled with a Secretary of State or governor that is Republican and part of Chris Kobach's program, be sure to check every 3 months and make sure they haven't stripped you from the voting rolls yet. Because if you live in a heavily Democratic or minority area, the odds are that you're going to show up on voting day and discover that they're giving you a placebo ballot called a provisional ballot. David K. Johnston, absolutely brilliant new book. Check it out. It's even worse than you think, what the Trump administration is doing to America. David, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, my thoughts, all of that stuff right after this. Thom Hartmann University Book Club today. We're reading from It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America by David K. Johnston. This is from page 61, the chapter titled Forgetting the Forgotten Man. In 2010, the U.S. Department of Labor created a website to honor workers who died on the job. Quote, more than 4,500 workers, lose their lives on the job every year. Below are the names of just a few who have died in recent months. OSHA's mission is to prevent workplace injuries, illnesses, and death, end quote. That Occupational Safety and Health Administration webpage was intended to highlight and humanize workplace deaths, to ensure awareness of tragedies, especially those that could have been avoided, according to Jordan Barab, an Assistant Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. Barab explained, without information like this, fatality statistics are just raw, sterile numbers. The purpose of adding names and circumstances was to impress people with the tragedy that workers and their families face day after day. In August 2017, Trump's Labor Department quietly removed the preamble and the names when it killed the web page. It also took down, without public announcement, the fatality inspection data for all years prior to 2017. Those are just two of many other Trump administration actions inimical to worker safety. Others included no longer posting press releases about deaths resulting from unsafe working conditions, delaying rules to reduce sickness and death from inhaling silica and beryllium at work, delaying rules to lower the risk of railroad engineers and truck drivers falling asleep at the switch or wheel because of untreated sleep apnea, and the appointment to the Supreme Court of a judge who held that a company had the right to fire a worker who chose not to freeze to death on the job. A reasonable person listening to Donald Trump's inaugural address would never have expected these and other actions, assuming he believed what Trump said. Trump declared, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no more. You came by the tens of millions to become part of a historic movement, the likes of which the world has never seen before. At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens," end quote. Those men and women were forgotten again the following week. And it's not just workers whose interests were forgotten, not to mention who were put in danger. By deciding not to implement a rule to reduce the chances of truck drivers and train operators falling asleep at the wheel, Trump put at risk the lives of families driving along the highway, people riding on passenger trains, and many others. The White House called it President Trump's war on regulation. In his weekly radio address in early May, he declared that we've removed one job-killing regulation after another, and they're not pretty, and they're going. And believe me, we're just getting started on regulations. They're gone. Removal of data on workplace deaths, which averaged 13 per day, infuriated Jordan Barab, who was Obama's number 2 at OSHA. As a private citizen, Barab created a web page to keep track of the names of the dead and the reasons they were killed on the job. He called it, "OSHA won't tell you who died in the workplace, we will." After the election, Barab's concerns that the Trump administration would be bad for workers increased when he asked where the Trump beachhead team was and learned that none was coming. Each incoming administrator sends people to scope out federal agencies, learn who does what, and get a feel for the place in advance. Then the incoming administration sends its landing team, the people who will initially implement its policies, for each agenda. Welcome back. The Senate has, on a vote of 81 to 18, has voted to basically break the filibuster, to move to proceed. In other words, to go on to a regular vote in the Senate, and that regular vote, in all probability, will simply pass. What I've not been able to find, and I have been watching a TV monitor and looking at the chyrons. I've been scrubbed through the Washington Post, the New York Times. I can't find the details of what it is they're voting on. And, if you have some particular insight, let us know. I'm guessing probably within an hour or two we'll know. But this is another example of the Republicans putting legislation out that was written by God only knows who. Typically it's written by lobbyists or, one of the various Koch networks, ALEC or something like that. And saying, vote on it and then we'll tell you what was in it. And certainly, the tax bill was like that. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see what happens with this. There were a few other issues that I wanted to discuss with you that I thought were of considerable import today. I mentioned this very briefly about an hour ago, but I want to develop it a little more. The most effective way to turn a government into a dictatorship, into a functional dictatorship, that is to say, the average citizen no longer has protections from the government. The average citizen is continually at the mercy of the government. The easiest way to do that is through a process called selective enforcement. Selective enforcement, broadly speaking, in this context, means you pass a law that is so broad that millions and millions of people are in violation of it, and you don't enforce that law. And when you notice people who are behaving in ways that you want to punish, then you enforce the laws selectively against them. We did this for centuries against people of color with, for example, loitering laws, jaywalking laws. Classic examples of selective enforcement. Look at all the civil rights workers and obviously all the people preceding them, but those were the ones that really started getting the headlines in the 1960s, who were arrested, who were beaten, who were jailed, who in some cases were even imprisoned over long periods of time because of what started out as a jaywalking arrest or a loitering arrest. That's selective enforcement. That is, everybody's guilty of it, but we prosecute the people we don't like. It is a fundamentally un-American value, but it is an old trick for despots, whether they were the Confederate despots trying to keep down people of color in the South, or frankly all over the country, or whether they are, some larger despotic regime, like, for example, China. This Chris Buckley, writing in the New York Times today, the headline, Chinese police seize publisher from train in front of diplomats. This guy is a Swiss citizen. He was born in China. He moved to Switzerland, but became a Swiss citizen. He owns a publishing company in Hong Kong. His name is Gui Minhai. And in 2015, he, along with 5 other booksellers, people who sold books in Hong Kong, vanished. The government kidnapped them. And then he resurfaced in China police custody. Chris Buckley writes, months after his disappearance, he appeared on state television confessing culpability for a drunk driving death more than a decade earlier. Oh, well, let's find something to charge him with. Oh, look at this. Somebody got killed by an unknown drunk driver. Let's make him the unknown drunk driver. Or maybe he's actually guilty of it. Who knows? But in this kind of situation, I'm skeptical. Mr. Gui was formally freed from detention last October, but he has been kept in China and forced to regularly report to the police. His daughter, Angela Gui, said by telephone from Britain, where she is a graduate student. So this is how they do it in China, basically. If you have anything on your computer or on your smartphone that is considered anti-government, they can arrest you. And pretty much everybody has some email, some tweet, some, or the Chinese equivalent. They don't allow Twitter and Facebook there because they're uncensored. But you've got, the Chinese equivalent that are acceptable to the government. And there's always something on there that they can say, see, look at this. So what might be the equivalent here in the United States? How about Jeff Sessions saying anybody who possesses, smokes, or uses pot is subject to federal law, federal criminal sanctions? There are a lot of people these days who are legally, at least in their states, smoking pot, or using edibles, instead of sleeping pills, or using edibles instead of pain medication. I mean, these things have significant, consequential, measurable therapeutic benefits. And I would think particularly in young communities and dissident communities, there's probably a lot of it. Remember John Ehrlichman candidly talking with, I think it was the Atlantic magazine, about how Nixon's 2 big enemies were blacks and hippies, so they criminalized heroin and marijuana, using the drug laws to take out their enemies? Is Jeff Sessions helping turn the United States into China? Is this step 1?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Do people in pot legal or even medical marijuana legal states need to worry about their doors getting kicked in if they get too politically active? Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It looks like the entire ultimate agreement by Democrats to go along with Republicans on this is based on Mitch McConnell saying, don't worry, in the next couple of weeks, I'll allow a process here in the Senate that will consider DACA. He's not saying that the legislation is going to get passed. He's not even saying any particular piece of legislation will be considered. He's not speaking certainly for Tom Cotton and the other hardcore, racist haters, basically. And he's not speaking for the House of Representatives. And Paul Ryan can refuse to allow a vote on anything, no matter how popular it is. Short of a discharge petition, which almost never happens. So basically, well, we'll have to see. I mean, this is a huge gamble. The way that I would, if I was running the Democratic Party, the way that I would advise them to proceed is to say, here are our demands. When you meet them, we will provide you with the 60 votes you want. In the meantime, if you think it's so important to open the government, you have the power to do that. All you have to do is a one-day withdrawal of the filibuster. You yourself can do that with 51 votes. You can blow up your own filibuster, and you can proceed to a vote. You've done it with judicial appointees. You can do it with this. Good luck, Republicans. It's in your court. That's what I would have said if I was running the Democratic Party. Now, what the Democrats apparently are doing is Mitch McConnell says, well, don't worry, sometime in the next week or two, I will allow a debate, a discussion here on the floor of the Senate. And the Democrats are like, oh, isn't that nice? Lucy footballs? I mean, it's like, we've been here before. It's incredible. It's incredible. Mel in Malvern, Arkansas. Hey, Mel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, you're cracking me up with that Chippy the Turtle impression, man, of Mitch McConnell. You had me laughing over that, dude.
Good. What's up?
I have a question. Have you ever heard the saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me?
Oh, yeah. George W. Bush mangled it, but yeah, it's an old cliche.
Well, when Democrats start talking about trusting Mitch McConnell to have this open hearing on the DACA and stuff.
Right, just like they trusted him to hold hearings on Merrick Garland.
Well, I keep thinking back to when he told his own Republicans that, this tax bill, the moderate Republicans, it's a moderate tax bill. He goes to the aggressive, super far right. Yeah, it's everything. He was telling everybody what they wanted to hear. So his own party shouldn't trust him. Why should we?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Tom, I sitting there thinking that. Why should we?
Exactly. Why should anybody?
His reputation is not quite as far in the toilet as Trump, but it's not smelling like roses either.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell is absolutely not capital N, not the guy to be trusting. Mel, well said. Thank you very much for the call. Jim in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call, sir.
Sure.
My question is when you opened up the show this morning and you were talking about the filibuster and Nancy Pelosi and the outsourcing of jobs, why didn't the Democrats use that? And eventually they will be back in power. What is to stop them from, overturning Citizens United? And I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot, Jim, for the call. There's a couple things, just like kind of basic stuff to understand about the differences between the House and the Senate. In the Senate, there is a filibuster, which basically means that in order to end debate and move to the final vote, it can take 60 votes. If a member of either party objects to the vote, it takes 60 votes to overcome that objection. That objection is called the filibuster. There's no equivalent to that in the House of Representatives. In fact, there have been several bills. Congressman Pocan was talking about one of them last week. Several bills that have been put forward in the House of Representatives that have more support, more co-sponsors than they need to pass. It takes 218 votes, as I recall, maybe 219, to pass a piece of legislation in the House of Representatives. And I'm pretty sure it's 218, but whatever. There's been legislation proposed that easily could get that, or has that. And yet Paul Ryan won't allow it to be voted on because it's legislation he doesn't like. So the House is run sort of like a kingdom, a fiefdom. And, well, the same thing in the Senate, actually. Mitch McConnell can block things from coming to the floor of the Senate as well, in the absence of a filibuster. But the filibuster is not a law, and it's not in the Constitution. It is a Senate rule, and the Senate can change their own rules anytime they want with a 50-vote majority, 51-vote majority. So they could blow up their own filibuster. So, the Democrats have been holding firm up to this point. It looks like they're caving. Whether they're caving wisely or not is something that time will tell. I have a lot of respect for Dick Durbin, and for Chuck Schumer. I don't agree with both of them all the time on every policy, but solidly 90% probably plus. They're good guys, and if they think that this is going to work, well, I'm willing to put my trust in them for the moment. We'll see. Donald in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Donald, what's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Tom. It really gets me, all of what you just said, I just saw going across the screen on MSNBC. I don't know if you noticed about, what's his name, our vice president, what's it, Pence?
Pence, yeah.
He's over there in Syria talking to a bunch of Air Force, at an Air Force base, and he's literally blasting the Democratic Party for holding back their pay. Now, it's bad enough, and during the 60s, 68, 69, we had 58% of the veterans were voting Republican. We don't need this now, because when these kids get out, that's what's going to be in their mind. They held back our pay, and the Democrats got their label on it. Now, I'm a veteran. You know me. I've called several times. And not only that, but they go ahead and they send a message on Washington. When you call them up, it mentions the Democrats are holding back are causing this shutdown and everything else. I don't know what our Democrats are doing. They should be speaking out against this stuff. And what you just said about if you were a Democrat, what you would do, that's exactly what they should be saying. They should say just like that and explain to the people exactly what the Republicans are doing and what the avenues they have that they could do on their own. We don't know that. Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and when the tables were turned, the Republicans did exactly what I'm describing. And it helped them electorally, and it helped them politically. They said to the Republican, or they said to the Democrat, the Republicans said to the Democrats, you guys, this is the first 2 years of the Obama administration, you guys control the Senate. Stop complaining about the fact that you can't get 60 votes. You can pass things with 50 votes if you just decide to change your own damn rules. And the Democrats basically had no answer to that. Well, we like the rules the way they are. And then everybody started calling Harry Reid a wimp, including me. And the Democrats could have played this exact same game. They could have turned the tables on the Republican, but they've chosen not to. And we'll again, I'm not presenting myself as all wise, but I think I'm right. But we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. And your point about Mike Pence, I mean, that is such a clear violation, if not of the law, then certainly of American traditions. I mean, we used to have this thing, partisanship ends at the water's edge, used to be the saying.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's one more thing I want to mention, too, about these people, like Mike Pence and even Kane, our one who ran for vice president. They're starting to use their kids now that are in the military as props, if you noticed.
Yeah.
When I got drafted, the soldiers, I don't remember any politicians' kids coming home in body bags or wheelchairs.
No.
But the thing is if this ever happened to any of them, you know what I would say to these politicians if I ever ran across them that lost their son or daughter? I'd say, how does it feel? That's exactly what I would say to them.
Yeah, that's a tough one, Donald. That's a tough one. But we really need to bring back the draft if we're going to continue to have these stupid wars. Donald, thank you for the call. Steve in Ronald, Washington. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I just wanted to maybe give a different perspective. I am a PCO, and I was listening to Tom Perez, and I am a PCO. This is the second time I've been a precinct committee officer for the Democrats. And I look at this as differently than I think most people. We have an opportunity here. I've had a very, very difficult life that I won't go into, but what it's taught me is to find the positives in extremely negative situations. And I think we have an extremely, extremely huge opportunity. Sorry to use huge, but big opportunity right now from an extremely negative situation for
I agree.
Democrats.
I agree.
As Democrats. And as socialists and as progressives.
Yep, just like the Great Depression set up Roosevelt. This corruption and frankly, I think an economic disaster is coming, but even without it, this corruption sets up an ethical party, the Democratic Party, which is moving in the direction of being more ethical.
I think we are going to have a financial crisis. I think just normal economics would put us on the downhill right now, even if Hillary would have gotten elected. But with Donald, I actually think we are going to have an economic crisis.
Yeah.
But my whole point here is that if we look at the glass half full, and from a positive standpoint, we have an opportunity as Democrats. But I'm tired of the normal Democrat process. Democrats are too smart.
Steve, we're hitting the break here. I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. Thanks so much for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls, and Bob Ney is going to drop by and tell us what's going on in the world today with Talk Media News in just a few minutes. And welcome back, Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. First of all, Claire McCaskill did introduce a bill to continue military pay even during the government shutdown. Mitch McConnell refused to put that up for a vote.
Yep.
Because they want to use the military as a prop.
Yep.
So I think, and that has been, people have been talking about that. Joe Scarborough even was talking about that a number of times. But I also wonder what happens if the Senate, if we do, whatever we pass out of the Senate, doesn't it have to go back to the House?
Yes, it does.
So what? I don't know what we're going to gain out of this anyway, because the House, they're crazier than the Senate.
Yeah. Well,
so
it's going to. I mean, if Democrats will support the effort in the Senate, in the House, if they'll follow their colleagues in the Senate, then odds are pretty good that it'll pass in the House. The question is whether Paul Ryan will bring it up for a vote. And I'd be amazed if he didn't.
Well, yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know if Paul Ryan will bring it up for a vote. I wouldn't put it past him not to, because he's definitely afraid of that.
Yeah, but that puts it all on him. I mean, keep in mind, this is a 3-week continuing resolution. This is not a budget.
That's true.
This is just a short CR. And
I do think, let me just say this, I do think that people are getting the message about this shutdown. First of all, most people automatically blame Republicans when we have a government shutdown, because who doesn't like government? That would be the Republicans, and I think people intuitively understand that. They don't believe that the Democrats don't want CHIP extended. I just can't imagine. Republicans are up there acting, all teary-eyed, like, these poor children aren't going to get their health, care. Well, I don't think people are falling for that. And the plurality of people are blaming Trump and the Republicans right now. So, I think we need to keep that in mind.
But that said,
people aren't that dumb.
There's a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign going on right now to shift that blame to the Democrats. And as our previous caller pointed out, Mike Pence is over in Syria right now telling American troops it's all the Democrats' fault. I mean, such a violation of the norms of office.
That ad, I think, is going to backfire. Ed Gillespie tried that in Virginia, and it backfired on him. He tried those same type of ads. They're just so blatant and so racist. It really does play to what the Democrats are accusing them of.
Yeah.
Racism. That this is about, their xenophobia.
Well, and it anchors and reinforces their base, which Democrats have to stop being afraid of.
Right. They already have those votes. Who's that going to play to?
Yeah, the Republican base is not going to change. You've got the xenophobes and the racists, and there's no way they're going to embrace the Democratic Party. And let them be the minority. I mean, the big challenge, of course, is that because they're in the minority, the party that represents them is going out of its way to prevent people from voting. I mean, I just saw today that about half, they're trying to do a recount in Detroit, about half the precincts they can't do a recount. There were actually more votes recorded than there were people who showed up. What's with that? I mean, this is the state where Trump won.
That's the only way they can win.
Right? Yeah. And,
the only way they can win now.
Yeah, it's an absolute mess, and to say that we're going to do anything based on we trust Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan is a real stretch. I'd want to see it. Trust but verify. But we'll see.
I agree with that.
We'll see. Anita, thank you for the call. Thank you very much. We'll be back with more of your... Actually, we'll be back with Bob Ney with Talk Media News right after this. Check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us, Bob Ney, the author of Sideswiped, reporter with Talk Media News Service. Congressman, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. As best as I can tell, this ending of the shutdown is coming about because Democrats are saying, okay, Mitch McConnell, we believe you and we trust you when you say that you will hold a hearing or a level playing field, whatever the hell that means, with regard to DACA in the next 3 weeks. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, yes, Tom. There's in my opinion, some great uncertainty here.
Yeah.
Severe uncertainty. I mean, if you had, the Republican leaders from the House on a lie detector machine here, and you asked them if they trust Mitch McConnell, let's see how the pin goes up and down. Okay?
Right.
So I do want to point that out, and I have served with him. I've been on a conference committee with him. He cannot be underestimated. In a poker game, I surely wouldn't. So I just wanted to point, that fact out. What I was reading between the lines here, and I think there's some deeper things are going on, and I think, let me just say that the Democratic side has an opportunity with DACA and a few other things they might want to add in immigration reform. So I'm not saying that they don't. That's not my point of this. But when Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, had said that, he wanted immediately for immigration legislation to start, because now there'll be a new deadline of February the 8th for the continuing resolution. And yes, it can all blow up again. But he wanted it immediately to start. I'm not seeing the word immediate out of Mitch McConnell.
Right.
I'm seeing where he wants it to come up again for DACA, to come up for an initial time, rather. But Mitch McConnell had said he doesn't want it to interfere with the temporary funding resolution that ends February 8th and then has to be continued after that. So I don't know if privately maybe, Chuck Schumer is counting the numbers and seeing, because he's going to have certain supporters on this. John McCain, he'll have Lindsey Graham, some other people will be supporters. There have been public statements by Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. Now, I listened to the one caller, and it's not, in this case, can't really prejudge what the House will do yet, because the pressure will come if the Senate's successful. Mm-hmm. That will create supreme pressure, right? But I would just venture to say that, Chuck Schumer's been around a long time. I served with him, but he better, on this one, he has to be very careful. Then again, though, if Mitch McConnell goes back on his word and doesn't aggressively act on this, they're going to be right back at it February the 8th again with the funding resolution.
Yeah.
I thought this was very shaky, Tom.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Very shaky.
But, at the very worst, it's only another 3 weeks. And so if Democrats get bamboozled, the worst they've lost is 3 weeks, unless there's something else snuck in here that I don't know about, which wouldn't surprise me.
But I was a little bit surprised because I saw what Senator Schumer said on the floor speech, but then again, I kind of wondered how Mitch McConnell would, respond to this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's to be seen yet.
Yeah, I agree. So what else is up in the world today, Bob? Ney?
I wanted to mention the world for a second, if we could, because we have three things, and a lot of it's been underplayed because, obviously, of the shutdown.
Mm.
But one is the hotel attack in Kabul, which reminds us we have been there 16 years, and the Taliban attacked the International Continental Hotel over there in Kabul.
Oh, my.
They killed 18 people. They went room by room, then they were stopped. They actually went in, somehow had dinner, finished the dinner, and pulled out AK-47s and proceeded to randomly shoot people. But, it's 16 years we have been there, so I'm not sure we know, what our mission is or what we're doing at that point in time, or the stability of that country. But
well, even during the British colonial era, I can't think of any time that any major country has been able to occupy a smaller country over a long period of time without having a growing and strengthening resistance movement, regardless of what you call it. And typically, the occupying countries call them terrorist movements, but the people on the ground think of them as homegrown revolutions. I mean, we threw the British out, kind of thing. It just seems crazy. We need to declare victory and come home, like Senator What's-His-Name advised LBJ.
Well, correct, because, look, Russia tried it in Afghanistan, and look what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And then moving on, but you're 100% right. I mean, we're done. And moving on to Jordan, Vice President Mike Pence, of course, was over there trying to smooth out with the the king now of Jordan, and trying to smooth some things out. So he got the task of going over there and trying to, speak with him about it.
He got lectured about it, about the Jerusalem thing, didn't he?
Right, and the king is a friend of ours. Jordan's been a great country. They've tried to help the refugees and the Palestinians.
The king's wife is an American.
Yes, Lisa Halaby was her maiden name. Her father was president of Pan Am.
Yeah.
Right. She's called Queen Noor, and she speaks fluent Arabic, and they love her over there.
Yeah. So to have the king of Jordan, tear into Mike Pence, that's a pretty amazing thing. I mean,
I thought it was, because they are normally quite friendly with them, and they've been very, very cooperative.
Of course, we've hit the break here, Bob, as you can hear the music.
Right.
Also, I believe that there's a larger Palestinian population in Jordan than there are Jordanese, Jordanians, I guess. Anyhow, Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Public Citizen has a new report out. It's called Forgetting the Forgotten. And it's a list of 101 ways in which Donald Trump has handed our government over to giant corporations and Republican mega donors instead of doing things that would benefit, average working citizens and, people, you, me, everybody else. And this, I think this is one of the most underreported stories of our era, is how the whole Republican machine, how the so-called conservative movement, and how the Trump administration have all become shills for billionaires and big corporations. Period, full stop. I mean, there used to be actual principles associated with the Republican Party. My father was a Republican. He would describe it to me like this. He would say, as a conservative, I believe in positive change. I believe in moving society forward, but you need to do it in a careful, thoughtful, incremental way, because if you flip society too fast, if you make things happen that are imprudent, you end up with the Soviet Union, or you end up with a Great Depression, or you end up with a Civil War, or you end up with all kinds of problems. And so you do things carefully and slowly. That's what conservative meant in the 1950s. Now, there was a whole bunch of subsets underneath that. There were people who used those as rationales to say, well, then we can't move too fast on civil rights, or we can't move too fast on this, that, or the other thing. But, the simple reality is that that kind of thinking is just gone. And now we're back to this 101 ways, as I was telling you, the Public Citizen has come up with, forgetting the forgotten, 101 ways in which we're basically, being screwed by the Republicans. On the line with us is Robert Weissman, the president of Public Citizen. Citizen.org is the website. Robert, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tom. Great to be with you.
Great having you with us. So tell us about this plutocrats over people study.
Well, in a way, it's sort of trying to capture the entirety, or at least a big chunk of the entirety of the Trump administration in a small little document. As you were saying, the president ran his campaign as a populist, and to understand why he won, I think we have to recognize that he, in his own twisted way, was speaking to people's legitimate grievances. that was a big part of what got him elected. As president, of course, he's governed as the most extremist corporatist the country has ever seen. And so our report aims to document that, from looking at things that are very high profile, like the tax cut that will confer more than $1 trillion on the super rich and the corporate class, to rollbacks of specific labor rules, undoing of particular environmental protections, and on and on and on, 101 on and ons.
Yeah, well, and all the more the tragedy. What were the things specifically that you were thinking of when you said that he campaigned on real grievances? And to what extent have those either A, not been addressed by the Republican Party or the Trump administration, or B, even it turns out in retrospect they were just plain old flat out lies?
Well, I would say that zero of the legitimate grievances have been addressed, and a lot of them, worse, he's done the exact opposite. So,
for example,
he didn't really offer much by way of reform, but he did identify the grievances. People needed jobs. They felt that their wages weren't adequate. And then especially what I think he captured was the idea that Washington is an insider's game. And the message was he was going to come, he was going to blow up the inside deal making, that's what drain the swamp meant, and make Washington serve, as he said, the forgotten man and woman. And it's been exactly the opposite. So if you start with that core idea of getting rid of the insiders, in fact, what he has done is turn over the government to corporate insiders. He has a cabinet of, the billionaire cabinet made up of the super rich. But if you look at the people who really drive policy, the second and third tier people, the assistant secretaries and the deputy secretaries, we found about 70% of them came directly from corporate America, from corporate affiliated think tanks. And in instance after instance, you actually have people who came from an industry about to oversee the industry that they used to work for. The most egregious example of that is now with the nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, who was formerly an executive at Eli Lilly, the big pharma company. Is unimaginable in any prior administration, even in the Bush and Reagan administrations, that we would have had a drug company executive as the nation's top health official, but that's what we're on the verge of getting. And if you sort of move away from just the idea of the inside deal making, without forgetting, of course, how Trump is making deals for himself, and you look at the policies, the people he said he was going to help, if you sort of think about the sort of prototypical lower middle class white voter, they are getting pounded by the policies that Trump is pursuing, from the tax policy or protecting big banks, making it so that consumers can't join together, to sue banks for rip-offs, to rolling back the overtime rule, which would ensure some fair payment to low-level managers, or now proposing to enable theft of tips, which would, of course, take money right out of the pockets of many of the people who voted for him. Even to things like undoing energy efficiency standards, which at the end of the day really help American consumers. And Trump and Scott Pruitt at EPA and Rick Perry at the Energy Department are conspiring to just pour gifts on the dirty energy industries and affiliated oil manufacturing at the expense of consumers and a green future.
Yeah, and Rick Perry with, Bob Massey showing up for that meeting with his action plan that they took in the photograph. And turns out that Trump has done most of the things now that Massey was promoting.
Yeah, and if you had, Perry proposed about a $3 billion annual subsidy be given to nuclear and coal companies on the just completely fabricated rationale that those were more dependable sources of energy. So therefore, all other sources of energy, which really actually means all consumers, should have to subsidize the coal and nuclear industry. And Perry wasn't that effort failed. He had to sort of run that by an independent agency, and even the Republicans on the agency said that's just completely crazy. But Perry was game to do it.
Yeah, but almost never do we hear a discussion of this in the media. For example, this morning, I while we were doing show prep for about 2 hours, I had the TV on I think it was MSNBC. Well, we were on CNN for a little while too. Just listening to how the coverage was, and everything was about: can you trust this man? Do you like this man? Do you hate this man? Who's going to have more power? Who's not going to have more power? And I kept yelling at the TV, what are the issues? What are the issues these guys are willing to shut the government down over? What are the issues that they're willing to give up on in order to unshut the government down? And there's like no discussion of these things. We don't discuss, and similarly, we don't discuss the actual crimes is the wrong word, but crimes against democracy maybe that Trump is engaging in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think his outrageousness makes it hard to turn away.
Yeah.
And it's obviously good TV, and some of that stuff, as you know and talk about it, it's really important, right? If he goes around and is spewing racist stuff, the media has to cover that, and they should be criticizing that. But they're ignoring the policies that are actually more meaningful than what he said, even on that dimension of racism. You look at the actual budget that his administration wants to put forward, not the spending bill we're going to get, but the budget they proposed. They wanted to eliminate funding for low-income home heating. They wanted to eliminate legal services for the poor.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're hitting a break here. Robert Weissman, hang on just a second, Robert.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Robert Weissman, the president of Public Citizen, and the website, of course, citizen.org. Robert, thanks so much for being with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Boy, what an interesting day it is. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think everyone should read David K. Johnston's book, his biography. It is so revealing, and he had been interviewed, by Amy Goodman, in the past year, and some of the revelations are just amazing, and yet in the standard, regular, media, it gets no traction at all. It would almost disqualify him even before he ran for president and while he was running for president. Like, for instance, the 200 undocumented Polish illegal workers who worked on demolishing the Bonwit Tower in New York before Trump Tower was built, and the litigation that was involved in that. And now it's just recently, I think in 2017, just recently, a district court judge has opened that up. So we'll probably find out a lot more about what actually happened with that. But, you would think that workers, people would read that and just think, well, first of all, he, really doesn't care whether there's illegal immigration in this country. He's used them himself and really used them. He only paid them $4 and didn't even give them safety and protective gear. He actually did, it was determined, hired them. He came on the site and talked to these people. So
right.
He has.
But John, they were white.
Beg your pardon?
But they were white people, John.
Right. Well, they were Polish white people, and I think that why he picked Polish workers, I have no idea, except that he doesn't mind, taking advantage of whoever. In Indonesia, he has a direct connection with Harry Tanu, one of the most bloodthirsty, I would say, people in Indonesia, who survived even after Suharto, and is has direct connections with generals that murdered lots of different people.
Well, and look at Duterte too.
Yeah, and baby Doc Duvalier also was known to associate with Donald Trump and bought a condo in.
Right. He
in the
laundered
tower.
money with him. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And then you have Omar Gaddafi. All of this. And yet our media is so weak that we cannot make a case against Donald Trump. It just is, thrown on the back page or just not talked about because we have to talk about whether he is actually a real legitimate candidate simply because I don't know. I don't know who decides, who are the editors that just leave all this stuff out. But it just makes your skin crawl when he talks about, David K. Johnston in his book talks about all these different connections that he has. And I mean, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, so he is he really has researched all of his material, and yet, it still goes on. He has connections with the Gambino crime family, with the Scarpo crime family. I mean, they're not a real power anymore, I think, in New York at this point, but they still have connections within unions and whatnot. It just amazes me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. John, thank you for the call. Very, very well said. And that was David's book from a year ago that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Good talking with you. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. And I have lost my one sheet here. I don't know what happened to it. Dr. J is on the line with us. Dr. Thank you very kindly, Sean. Dr. Javad Agalu. Am I saying that right, Dr. J?
It's Javad Agalu. That's why they call me Dr. J.
Javad Agalu, thank you very much. You are a dentist, and you're doing some really, really remarkable stuff. Tell us about where you are, where you live, and how this came about.
Okay, so I'm a general dentist, and I have an office in El Centro, California, which is kind of the southeastern corner of California. It's right on the border of Mexico and about 60 miles or so from Arizona. So it's a very rural and depressed, medically and dentally depressed area, and I just saw a huge need. A lot of people that don't have dental insurance or have the Medicaid type of dental insurance, which is called Medi-Cal or Denti-Cal in California, and I thought I had to do something to kind of help them.
And so what did you do?
So I started a nonprofit corporation that's called SAGE. It started off with children. I started seeing children that had no dental insurance or their parents couldn't afford dental treatment, and that's what SAGE is. It stands for Student Age Gap Elimination. There was a gap between kids of student age between like 5 and 16, 17 that just weren't able to get dental care. And so I started seeing these patients on weekends out of my private office for free. And then it just kind of took off. And now SAGE sees pretty much anybody that's low income, people that are undocumented immigrants, people that have no dental insurance, and of course veterans. I don't know if you know this, Tom, but as far as the VA seeing veterans for dental care, you have to be 100% service-connected disabled, which aren't that many. There's a lot of people that are 90% and so forth, and they don't get any dental coverage from the VA.
Whoa. That's not a good thing. We're talking with Dr. J. His website's sageinitiative.org. You can tweet him at sageinitiative, the number 1, and Sage Initiative 1. And you're funding this out of your own pocket, aren't you? Out of your own profits from being a regular dentist?
I am. So, again, I have one private office in El Centro, California, and another private office in Palm Desert, California, which is close to another rural and economically depressed area. So in between those areas, right now I see patients out of those two private offices of mine on weekends, and actually I've integrated them into my normal schedule as well. And yes, I don't have any funding right now. I have somebody trying to get grants, writing grants, but as of now, it's out of my own pocket.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Are you familiar with other dentists around the country who are doing things like this? Were you inspired by somebody else, or do you hope to be that inspiration for others? And if so, have you had any nibbles from other people who might be interested in doing what you're doing?
Well, of course, there are a lot of dentists that do this sort of thing, but usually it's a one-time thing. It's like the Doctors Without Borders and so forth, where you go for one weekend here or there. But my vision is to have something there all the time for regular dental care and preventative dental care, not just one emergency. In fact, I'm a veteran myself. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve, and 2 weeks a year we do missions like that around the country and so forth in economically depressed areas. And that does a lot of good for a lot of people, but there's so much more out there, and we want to get into prevention and routine care, not just treating an emergency or an infection. And so my vision is to have something there permanently.
That's remarkable. And are you finding that other dentists around the country are inclined to do what you're doing? I mean, do you see any other SAGE initiative type things popping up around the country?
I haven't really seen it exactly like SAGE initiative. Again, there are dentists that want to volunteer their time, but it amounts to 1 day a month or one weekend every couple months, which is great. But again, my vision is to have something there all the time, and I haven't really seen that anywhere. Yeah. In fact, I have other dentists that work for me in my private offices, and they also help out with SAGE. They started off, kind of volunteering here and there, but if they're able to treat patients consistently, I end up paying them. I mean, because they need to, just like anybody else, they need to support themselves and their families. But as far as myself, Tom, this is definitely my passion, and I'm willing to put my own time and treasure and effort into it as well.
Yeah, good on you. Did this come out of your belief that we should live in a we society, not a me society?
It absolutely is. We should live in a we society. I think we're only as strong as the health care of our weakest people, and right now the vision and the goal of SAGE is to take money out of dental care. It should not be for profit. It should not be based on somebody's economic status or how much money they have. It should be a right, not just saying, does somebody have access? I think that we all have access. Anybody can drive up to a dental office and say, I want this type of treatment or I need this type of treatment, but can they pay for it is the question, Tom. So yeah. I want to take that out of it because, as you know, the mouth is part of the rest of the body.
Right. Yeah, no, it's all interrelated. Dr. J, you're doing God's work. The website, sageinitiative.org. Sage Initiative 1 on Twitter. Thank you, sir.
It's actually
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program.
Hang on just a second.
202-808-9925.
What do I have wrong?
It's sageinitiativeiv.org.
IV.org. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it is the last half hour of our program. Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Well, I was kind of dovetailing on that other caller from Washington. I'm in Eastern Washington, and I went to a Washington State Democratic meeting just because I got a text to do so, and ended up signing up to be a PCO. There's still like 4 open spots for people that you could just walk in and sign up and get it. And become a precinct committee person, or what's the O stand for? Yeah, to be a precinct committee officer. Yeah. And also I found out, I just went to this meeting, found out that my neighbor within walking distance from me is running for state senate, and I decided to get involved in her campaign. So cool. I went from yelling at my TV in anger to actually feeling like something might be done. And for people in Eastern Washington, this used to be considered a pretty much forget it Republican district, and found out this now is it's now just considered leaning Republican districts. Mm-hmm. So if people actually get out there and spread the message, we might be able to turn it into a leaning Democrat district. Yep. There you go. Mark, that is spectacular. And just real quickly, for people who might be thinking about, gee, maybe I should show up at my local Democratic Party and join to become, or volunteer to become a precinct committee officer or whatever. What was it like when you first visited? Were you welcomed or not? Has it been a big, consumer of time or money or anything like that? I mean, what would you say to people who are thinking about it? I got a text because I'd gone to one when Bernie was running. Mm-hmm. I got a text from Alex, the state coordinator, and I showed up. Now, let me give you a clue here, Tom. I'm 60 years old. I got long hair. I got a biker vest and another hat on, and I was welcomed with open arms. Huh. That's great. And I'm left to Bernie, and that's what attracted people from the Karen Hardy campaign to ask me to help them because they're tired of that too. Yeah, you're breaking up, Mark. I said, well, that's what they asked me to help because they're tired of corporate Democrats too.
Aha, I see. Well, Mark, congratulations. Good on you. Will you keep us up to date? Give us a call from time to time. Let us know how things are going.
Sure.
Great.
It's early in the thing, but as things progress, I'll call you and let you know how things are going.
Thank you. And Mark is such a classic case in point of just show up, damn it. Just show up, and you'll be amazed.
You never know what'll happen.
There you go. There you go. Mark, thank you very much, and thanks for the call. That's so inspiring. John in Everett, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Happy Monday.
Thank you. Back at you.
Shutdown is all about the federal budget, and the Dems wanted to get DACA out of it, but it seems now they've backed off, and based on the words of Trustworthy Turtle.
Yeah.
So I don't know just how important the budget is. I've read very little about it in the corporate media as to what the contents of that budget are. And I know from your statements that about $500 million is going to be cut out of the Social Security operating budget.
Yeah, $452 million.
And I basically called my Democratic senators here in Washington to vote against it if it has cuts in Social Security, because this goes along with the Republican philosophy of try and shoot it with one bullet, and if that doesn't work, you try 1,000 cuts.
Right.
And they did that on Postal Service, on the Affordable Care Act, and now they're at Social Security again. So I think that's the only thing we can do is stand up and say no.
Yeah, I agree. And with regard to Mitch McTurtle and the Democrats rolling over, I saw Norman Ornstein tweeted the metaphor that I had used when I opened the show, which was Lucy with the football. The Democrats are sort of like Charlie Brown right now, and Mitch McConnell's playing the role of Lucy. I agree. We'll see. But I suppose the good news for what is in there, I mean, and this is probably what a lot of these Democrats who are voting for this are saying to themselves, is at least we're getting a 6-year extension of the Children's Health Insurance Program. So we've got that out of the way. So basically, we're paying for the hostages that the Republicans took. They took Chip hostage. They created the hostage, actually they've created multiple hostages here. But with DACA, they created that hostage by canceling President Obama's executive order and having it expire March 5th. So we knocked down one anyway. I guess that's their rationale. I still think that that by caving, what they did was they just vindicated everything that the Republicans and the president have said. Now, Trump is out there going, see, they finally came around to their senses. Well, it's got nothing to do with Democrats or senses. It's got to do with all the Republican lies and perfidy. But anyhow, John,
One quick question, Tom. Yeah. One quick question. Where on the Internet or other news source could I find out what's in the budget?
Whoa, that's a good question. Budget. Yeah, I have not seen a good summary of it anywhere, frankly. And I mean, I would look at Common Dreams. I would look at ProPublica. It does some really good in-depth research. I'd look over at Think Progress. Those are the places that would be more likely to have more in-depth versions. Nation, thenation.com. I'm not sure. Let me, this is going to be coming up in a big way over the next few weeks, John, and I will make a sincere effort to educate myself and thus you, and also to share with you all the resources that I can find out, okay?
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks a lot, John. Good to hear from you. Bye. Susan in Las Vegas. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I was just reading a little snippet. I don't know if you've ever read Edward Gibbon's book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
I pretended to read it when I was in high school. I read the Cliff Notes version.
There's 5 attributes which mark the fall of the last Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And the 5 attributes are a mounting show of luxury, a widening gap between the rich and the poor, obsession with sex, freakishness in the arts masquerading as originality, and an increased desire to live off the state. And it kind of scares me because it feels like we're headed down that path.
Although I'm not sure that there was never a point in history where you couldn't look at local events and say, see, here it is. I'm not sure that we're so much in decline because I think we have still a very, very strong foundation in this country. We own our continent essentially. We are rich in natural resources. We are wealthy in people. We still are the wealthiest country in the world, although China any day now may surpass us on that. I still think that it's possible if we were to seize back, fundamental ideas of governance to return America to a first world country. It's just that, this whole cokehead philosophy has devastated us.
Yeah, I think with Trump as president, it's really degrading our standing in the world.
Yeah, very well said. And in fact, all the surveys and polls show that that's the case. Susan, thank you very much for the call. Well said. Jack in Lenoir City, Tennessee. Am I saying that right?
That's it, Jack.
Hey, Jack, what's up?
Thanks, Tom. A couple of quickies. I moved from the north, so I'm a Yankee, to Tennessee, and they said, "You're the only Democrat in Tennessee," and I said, "No. The governor was in Tennessee when I got here."
Right, and he was a Democrat. Yeah.
So Tennessee is not a conservative state; it's an independent state. These people aren't going to vote party politics.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing was, I keep looking at the network newscasts, and they talk about Trump's promises. But Trump's promises didn't get him elected. What got him elected was anti-establishment.
Well, that was one of his promises, was, drain the swamp, blow up the system, go after the banksters, break up the big banks, stop the trade scam that was started in the early 90s, all this other stuff. And obviously he's not doing any of it. In fact, if anything, he's putting more cronies in and further cementing the power of the big banks, et cetera. Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Jack, well said. Thanks for the call. Danita, am I saying that right, in Bremerton, Washington?
Yes, you are. Let me take you off speaker.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Oh,
you wanted to talk about Susan Collins?
Yes. I'm trying to take you off speaker, but it's not letting me.
That's
do
okay.
it.
Your speaker sounds just fine, Danita.
Yeah,
just go ahead.
Actually, I'm sorry about that. Yes. Look what they did to Susan Collins. I mean, they pretty much made her prostitute herself and messed over her state, promising her about the medical situation to get her vote, and literally publicly embarrassed her.
Yeah, this was several months ago you're talking about.
Yes, and so you can't trust these guys. Nobody can trust these guys.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of liars, like Al Franken said. So I just wanted to kind of put that across because, that's what they're going to do to us.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for bringing the news to us all.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Danita. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Another thing that I'd like to just point out real quickly is we just discovered that right after the tax law passed, here the headline says it all by Mary Poppenfuss over at Huffington Post. Paul Ryan collects $500,000 in Koch contributions days after House passed tax law. $500,000 from Charles Koch and his wife, given to Paul Ryan's interests. 5 other donors, including billionaire businessmen Jeffrey Hildebrand and William Parfait, each contributed $100,000 in the last quarter of 2017, according to the records. Adam Smith, spokesperson for the campaign finance reform group Every Voice, said, "It looks like Speaker Ryan is quickly being rewarded for passing this legislation that overwhelmingly benefits the Kochs and billionaires like them." Gee, what a surprise. I'm telling you, investing in politicians right now is the most profitable thing you can do in America, if you have the money.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
The only problem is investing in politicians in a big way is something that probably only 10 or 20,000 Americans in the entire country can even participate in. And welcome back, Richard in Durham, North Carolina. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Yes, Tom, I got a couple questions I'd like to ask you. What do you think of autonomy for the African American community in 5 to 7 states of the South?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, do you know what the population is of the African American community in these states? I'll tell you, it's about 22 to 25 million.
Okay.
And that It's the only place in the country where we own land, where we have farms, where we have colleges, where autonomy would be a great issue to advocate for.
By autonomy, what do you mean, Richard?
I mean, we could advocate for peaceful, nonviolent autonomy where we govern ourselves. Take the God-given right to self-determination.
Are you talking about having black communities essentially secede from the Union?
No. We would use a technique in which most of the whites in the South did not own slaves, did not own a plantation. Right. We would form an alliance with them, which would bring about something similar to the schism that was brought on by the South wanting independence.
Isn't that sort of what the Democratic Party has been doing over since the 60s, of trying to form alliances between black, white, Hispanic, multiracial groups, multicultural groups, trying to bring people together under one umbrella?
Well, you see, what has happened right now is that the Republicans have successfully stigmatized the Democrats as the party of the N-word. Mm-hmm. Therefore, both parties equally work against us.
So, create a new party for black people?
No. We begin with a form of forgiveness for past mistakes with this segment of the whites in the South who never owned slaves or owned a plantation.
Right.
And then we would take that alliance and put a non-binding referendum on the ballot to allow the people to vote yes or no for some form of autonomy.
Mm-hmm. I could see this happening at the community level, and I think that there probably are a lot of communities where basically you just end up with it's a largely black population, you end up with a largely black power structure. But I think that maybe you're more idealistic than I am on this. I don't know how practically it can be done, but it's an interesting beginning point for conversation, Richard, and I hope that in the future we can continue the conversation. We're hitting a break here, so I've got to run. But thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you in the last 15 minutes of our program, or last 10 minutes of our program. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I'm calling about a disturbing story that we heard last evening from our son who lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. You can look up the news story. I'll spell the doctor's name. This is a 43-year-old Polish physician who has been here since age 3. He's living in Kalamazoo.
Yeah, I read the story.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You did. What do you think of that? Isn't that selective enforcement?
Well, as I recall, there was something in the story that suggested that he was speaking out on behalf of immigrants. Am I remembering that correctly? That brought him to the attention of ICE?
Yes.
Yeah. So you could argue that that's selective enforcement, or you could argue that he's breaking the law and he simply brought it to their attention, so now they have an obligation to fulfill the law. But I do agree with you that the whole selective enforcement equals tyranny thing, which is the conversation that I had started earlier, where I was talking about in China now how they're busting anybody who speaks against the government, and if they want to destroy you, all they have to do is send a tweet to your phone or an email to your phone that says something bad about the government, and then they go, aha, you have it. Just like, in the United States, there have been people they've tried to set people up by sending them child porn. I think it's been a few years since anybody has tried that successfully, but there were stories at the time, when these laws were being passed. And that kind of selective enforcement is not a hallmark of a democracy or even a healthy society. It's a hallmark of tyranny. Yeah, of dictatorship.
Yeah, tyranny.
Yeah.
But the thing that troubles me about it is this doctor apparently has had a lifetime green card.
Yeah.
And he's married with children, and he's highly regarded there at Branson Medical Center where he works.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently when he was a teenager, he got into some skirmishes with the law. And now, apparently, because of that, they can't even get him bail, and so he's probably going to be held for a while. And I think it's very likely that he will be deported, in spite of the fact that the people where he works are very fond of him and have high regard for him.
Right. Plus, he doesn't speak Polish. He came here when he was 3 years old.
Yeah. Right. Well, my husband speaks Polish, and he came here. He was born here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
so it happens.
Yeah. No, it does, and I don't know enough about that story to know if we should be extraordinarily outraged or simply saddened. But in either case, it's just another example of how broken our immigration system is right now, and how basically Republicans are unwilling to fix it in any consequential way. All they want to do is use it as a political bludgeon. And
I think they can trust Mitch will take care of it just fine.
Exactly. Carol, thank you for the call. Yeah, very well said. Good talking to you. Fred in Bremerton, Washington. Hey, Fred, what's on your mind?
Oh, good morning, afternoon, evening. I really appreciate your program. You seem to put a spin on things that is it's needed. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, I'm calling you because I listened to this issue about DACA, and it reminds me of something. I was born and raised here. I don't know any other country other than America. I've been to other countries. I know what it's like to live in other countries, both in the South as well as in Asia as well as in Europe. This thing with DACA kind of interests me because it's like that old verse of the prose about the lack of the nail, the shoe is lost, and eventually you'll lose the war. It seems to me that if you start kicking all the people out who do the stoop labor and the minimal tasks in this country, the ones who clean the bathrooms, the ones who clean up the spit on the operating room floors, the ones who stoop over to pick our strawberries and reach up in the trees to pick our apples and pears and our cherries and our hops and our barley, all those people that they don't want in this country because what they do and what they stand for is going to end up blowing up in our face, because eventually you're not going to have those people that are going to be doing that stoop labor and that cleaning up after all us white people, and you're going to end up having to either do it yourself or you're going to have to pay dearly for
I think what the Republicans are betting on, Fred, is that they can, while they are expelling people of color, they can also, through their economic policies and their anti-union policies, they can also throw so many white people into poverty that they're willing to work for $3 an hour picking cotton or picking whatever it may be. But, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But there's another piece to this, Fred, if I may just go off on a rant here. Thank you for the call. You set it up perfectly. When Louise and I lived in Vermont years ago, she had a garden. And there was a hedgehog or a groundhog that lived nearby. And he was constantly getting into her garden. In fact, he built a burrow in her garden. And he loved the echinacea. And we figured out that there were some things he ate and some things he didn't. So anyhow, Louise called the local animal control people and said, I got a hedgehog in my garden. What do I do? And the guy said, well, what people usually do is they take a have-a-heart trap and they trap them and they take them out in the woods and they dump them. He said, but almost 100% of the time when you do that, the hedgehog will die because he is adapted to the environment in which he is living right now. And when you drop him in the woods, you're dropping him into somebody else's territory, and he's going to be in a complete different ecological niche. He's not going to know how to basically communicate with the other animals around him. He's not going to know what to do. He's not going to know what resources are there. He's not going to be able to get ready for winter. He's going to die. And Louise was telling me that story over the weekend, reminding me of that story over the weekend. We ended up just living with the hedgehog for year after year after year. Every year we tweaked our garden a little bit and said, okay, this part the hedgehog will eat. These are the things he won't eat. And so we just, planted a lot of stuff he didn't eat. And always a little echinacea plant for the hedgehog. But humans are like that too. We are mammals. Humans are mammals. And we're talking about taking people who have literally never known Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Poland, whatever it may be, have never known it. They came to the United States at 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and we're going to throw them back into that environment. You're going to see people die. You're going to see people's, not just lives destroyed, psyches destroyed, emotions destroyed. You're going to see people die. And that's the Republican policy, and all the more the tragedy. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.